Friends, in this video for iThought Advisor, I'm going to talk to you on the topic, the toughest part of giving advice. In an advisory relationship, the advisor gives advice to the investor. It's up to the investor to take the advice, to accept the advice, and to implement the advice. Execution is done by the investor. So, between giving advice and execution, the investor plays a far bigger role and has far more decision power. The advisor controls nothing between the point of giving advice and the execution. It's entirely up to the investor. So, even if the advisor has given the most appropriate and sensible advice to the investor, if the investor chooses to pause, to wait, or to ignore the advice, the investor is not going to get the benefits which that advice should have rendered for him. It's like paying a subscription to go to a gym, to have your own trainer, and not doing what the trainer asks you to do, was not going regularly. Many times, this comes to hurt the relationship itself, because in the mind of the investor, he thinks it is the advisor's responsibility to make him succeed in his investing. But in the process, investors often ignore what is their own responsibility, or what is the fiduciary nature or relevance of the advisor. Instead, most investors simply want to hold the advisor responsible for their investment outcome. So, without fulfilling that role which they need to fill between the advice and execution, investors immediately go between execution and review and park themselves there. Often, I have observed that investors refuse to even recognize the execution gap, but are more than happy to look at the measurement and come up with what they think are observations and gaps. But from experience, the hard reality is that the advisor does not have the power to control execution, and by virtue of that, the advisor's power to actually ensure that the investor gets his investment performance is greatly diminished, and that's the hard truth about being an advisor. Regulation clearly says that you can only tell them what to do. It is entirely up to them to accept, execute, and get the benefits. Also, the responsibility of acting in time, accepting decisions, ensuring that you have executed the decisions exactly in the way in which the advice is rendered, ensuring the advice itself is detailed enough to ensure proper execution. All these are open-ended responsibilities. We are still coming to grips as to who should take the onus. As an investor, assume that you go and buy an apartment. A lot of responsibility is taken by you voluntarily. But when you make an investment, the involuntary reflex is to see how you can move the responsibility to somebody else without giving him the authority to do what needs to be done, because the authority is vested with you. So that lack of understanding about the importance of execution the role of the investor in execution has been a serious lacuna in advisory relationships. That is clearly the weakest link and the toughest part of giving advice. It is also not widely spoken because no advisor wants to say this openly and incur the displeasure of the investor. It's like bitter medicine. But unless an investor is made to understand his role in execution and made to fulfill that role in a way which serves his interest, the effectiveness of the advice will stand diminished. And that, in my view, is the toughest part of giving advice today. I really hope investors bridge this gap between advice and execution and then seamlessly extend it to review. Then the advisor will be more than happy to not only review but also give secondary advice wherever necessary and ensure that there are no advisory gaps which affect the investment outcome. Eventually, it takes two hands to clap, and similarly, in an advisory relationship with an investor, it needs two participants to tango. Both need to play their roles and both must be aligned to ensure that the outcome is satisfactory to both. Thank you for watching this video.